And welcome once again to another episode of Strange Planet. Thanks for sticking me in your ear. Over the next 45 minutes, my guest is going to share his own personal contact experience, which prompted him to create a community of over 1 million people all over the world to come together for the People's Disclosure Movement. He'll also discuss how they're using CE5 to make contact. Kosta Makreas is the founder of etletstalk.com, the ET Let's Talk community, the People's Disclosure Movement, the People's Love Alliance, and the Global CE5 Initiative. Costa is an international networker and creative artist working on behalf of harmonious relations between all life forms. He was born in Fort Wayne, Indiana, and earned a BA in computer science, which led to a successful 4-decade software consulting career in the Silicon Valley. Costa, welcome to the program. How are you?
I am fine, Richard. Thank you very much. And I hope you're fine as well.
I am. Thank you. Thank you for asking. So let's dive right in. Tell me, what is this People's Disclosure Movement? It's huge.
It is huge. Even I was surprised when I started counting. And by no means do I think I was as thorough as it deserves. But 1 million people or more, that's an exciting number. The good news about it is that it's really a people-powered movement, a grassroots movement of people like you and me and your listeners and viewers who are making their own contact with these star civilizations that have been here for a long time, but in greater numbers are visiting the Earth now. What launched the idea really was the fact that uh, many viewers out there, and even now, have been interested in the UFO UAP topic. I mean, it's a hot thing pretty much all over the world. It has taken off happily in the last several decades, the general interest in it. But there have been and still are a lot of people who are waiting for some government, a prime minister, a president, a premier, somewhere to make this official announcement that we have disclosure, telling the world that we are being visited. You know, it's real. These different star civilizations have been around, they are around, and that our governments are in contact with them. That announcement sometimes trickles out in different ways, as people in the United States know. But so many people are still waiting for something big like that to happen. And if you're like me, I got frustrated and tired of doing that, putting my time and energy into chasing down, what's happening here, what's happening there. Is that announcement going to happen? And who's going to do it? Uh, Finally just realized that by making our own contact in the People's Disclosure Movement, we take our power back from those authorities and put it back into ourselves and into our movement, into our networks, and we do the disclosure ourselves, kind of a roll your own, do it yourself, because it's not just against the fact that others won't tell us the truth that we already know. I mean, they're here, they're clear, get used to it. So it's more about us getting empowered and forming this movement so that we share our stories. We make all kinds of contact. And believe me, members in this movement have told me amazing stories and experiences over the years. I can't even recount them. But the fact is that even before I discovered that this movement was afoot and that, we were actively making it bigger, millions of people all over the world have had contact with UFO, UAP. But I don't know about other countries, but at least in the USA, where I grew up here in the Midwest and then in the 60s and 70s, you couldn't talk about it. I knew lots of people who had their own experiences. Maybe you, Richard, have been one of them, and a lot of people listening to this as well have had their own experiences, but you couldn't talk about it a few decades ago because you would be called out, as a liar, as crazy, have your marriage break up, lose your job, get institutionalized. That has happened to lots of people that I know along the way. But times have changed now, and there's a lot more openness. about this topic. A lot of people have come out of the ET closet and are telling their stories and experiences. And that's what the People's Disclosure Movement is about. We are in every country of the world. We are on social media, connecting with each other, sharing stories, empowering each other, and basically doing our own disclosure. It's us telling each other the story that it's already happening. You know, we don't need some formal announcement to tell us what we already know. Again, they're here, they're clear, get used to it, and let's take the next step of using human initiated contact to form relationships with them. So the movement's not only about discovering the fact and telling everyone around us that this phenomenon is real, we are being visited. But the next step is, and that's the step that we're taking in this movement, is to form relationships. The contacts, and many of us have contacts of different kinds with these civilizations. My contacts have told me that they are not to be looked upon as gods, but that we should consider them as family, as elder brothers, sisters, and cousins. So what I like to promote within this movement is the fact, again, of relationship. Once you believe and you know, and let me just put it this way, we become knowers, having transformed from being believers in this movement. And there's nothing like having your own contact that changes your life and that nobody can talk you out of. That's being a knower, not just a believer. Once you're that knower, you realize these civilizations are sentient beings, many different kinds of craft from many different places, but those of them are willing to reach out to us and are asking us actually to connect with them in many different ways. And that has been happening in this movement. So that's what it's about. And the goal of this is full open contact someday. I personally believe the situation is not yet right on Earth for them to make a mass appearance, but that's on its way. And we have a lot of work to do on Earth, and that's what the People's Love Alliance is about, which I can talk about more later. But it's the fact that we need to create a more stable Earth environment where we're actually honoring and loving each other as a human family, while we're reaching out to the stars for these other civilizations and inviting them to come to an Earth that will welcome them instead of shoot at them or be afraid of them, or some other negative kind of reaction. The truth is they're very loving, and I'm not naive about this. There may have been some bad actors, but by and large, the mass preponderance of evidence that we've had over the decades that they've been around, and in the last 16 years that we've been making contact with them, is that they want to make a connection, they are benevolent, and they want to form a partnership and help us out with the problems that we have here on Earth. And, you know, we've got a lot of them, but we also have a lot of help if we request it. So this is a partnership. Humanity becoming cosmic humanity through the People's Disclosure Movement, and us taking the reins ourselves and forming the future we want instead of waiting for someone else to announce it for us.
How did it start for you personally? You had a 4-decade career in software consulting. Was there
Oh, yeah.
one specific event that led you to leave all of that world behind and embrace this People's Disclosure Movement?
Yeah, absolutely. And before I tell that story, I want to say that most of the people out there who are interested in this topic and have had their experiences have had their own experience. So what I'm about to relate is by no means just about me. My particular experience might be specific to me, but in so many different ways, there are thousands of people that I've networked with over the years who have their own, what I call, origin story. So my origin story is that, in short, I was a pretty normal kid. I grew up in the American Midwest, had an interest as a child in science fiction, in astronomy, in the NASA program of the day, you know, the Mercury, Gemini, and Apollo programs, which ignited my imagination. But at some point, I think I was 10 or 11, I picked up a book, and it was written by one of the contactees of the late 50s with pictures of UFOs. And this just lit me up. And I knew right away, because of my interest already in space and science fiction, that this was a thing, that they really were here. I looked at the pictures of classic saucer-shaped objects with domes, et cetera, et cetera. And this was at the time before Photoshop and computers. So even though there were people here and there that were faking things, by and large, I really know that there were genuine contactees. And at that time in the 60s, late 50s and 60s, some of them were writing these books and telling their story to the public and getting persecuted for it, by the way, in one way or another. But at the same time, they were lighting up kids like me. Fast forward to 2006, during my career in the Silicon Valley, my day job was a software engineer and a consultant. But I happened to find a group on the internet that announced something that was really revolutionary for me, which is you can initiate the contact with these beings. Along the way, I had met many friends and relatives who had had passive contact. I mean, they had ships flying over their cars, the engines dying, classic kind of experiences. And these were people that I believed because I was related to them or they were a friend, until I saw the ability for me and others to do our own connection. I never thought that would be possible. So I spent a week in Mount Shasta, in Northern California, with a group of people sitting out under the stars in the footsteps there of the mountain and having experiences. And several things happened during that week. The major thing was one night after we had had a group meditation and had contact, seen lights in the sky, orbs in the trees, all kinds of phenomena that we were learning to recognize as not being, terrestrial or human made. A group of, I think about 10 of us were sitting around talking in a clearing surrounded by a forest, again, at the foot of the mountain. Someone tugged on my sleeve and pointed off to my right, not more than 6, 7, 8 feet away from me. And what I saw materializing out of thin air was a small sphere, maybe about 3 feet, kind of doing a slow fade in. I had to rub my eyes and go, hey, is that the light of the setting moon or the leaves or whatever faking me out? But it wasn't. Everyone else saw this sphere materialize. It was opaque, couldn't look into it, and it floated above the ground for about half an hour. Later, we came to realize that we believe this sphere, what we saw, was really part of a larger craft that was not fully into our dimension, but just the part that we saw was. So for that half hour, we whispered among ourselves and looked at this thing, didn't make a noise. There was no temperature changes, no wind. But one of the people in the group suddenly announced to us that he had a telepathic message from the beings inside that craft who told him that they are scientists who have come to Earth to study the human energy systems. And I thought to myself when I heard that, that makes sense to me. We humans are explorers. Why aren't other civilizations? They've come this far for reasons. And if they're doing some kind of a study of the native population, then I guess we are those subjects. During that half hour, after we got that message, there was a woman standing next to me who'd become a friend. It was a very good psychic. And she stood very stiff as a board like this with her arms out for the whole half hour, not moving. And I knew something was going on, but I didn't want to disturb whatever it would be. But I stayed close enough in case she showed any signs of distress. And after half an hour, she kind of wavered and wobbled a little bit. And I steadied her by the shoulders and asked her, "Are you okay? And what happened?" In essence, she told me, and she shared this with the group the following day when we all met. But in that moment, she said, what had happened is that one of the beings from this craft had approached her psychically, telepathically, and asked her if it could merge, if he, she, or it could merge with her and study her energy system. Now, a lot of people at that point would run away with their hair on fire and head for their car. And, that would be end of the night, right? But this was an amazing woman. While she was there being quiet, not moving, this was all going on, right? Within her. And she negotiated with this being. I mean, imagine having your act that together, that not only do you not run away, but you're negotiating, like saying, okay, you can do that, but I have 3 conditions. So she said the first condition is that she remain conscious of her surroundings while the merge was occurring, and the being agreed to that. And the second condition was that the being should leave, when she told it to leave, and got an agreement for that. And the third condition, and this is not to make light of it, but she just said, no messing with my sex organs. My genitals and other parts of me down there are off limits. And the being agreed to that. I'm sure they understood that that stuff is a concern for humans. So that agreement allowed the being to do whatever it was doing energetically. And at the time when she wobbled was the point at which she had told it telepathically, okay, I'm done, time to go. And the merge ended, the experiment ended. And then as she finished her story, I watched this little sphere. And I have to mention, it was maybe about, like I said, 6, 7, 8 feet from me. It just started dissolving into thin air, doing a slow fade like a movie, and it was gone. That was the experience that said to me, hey, Costa, you just had your own experience. This isn't secondhand from a trusted other source. This is what you saw. You saw it with other adults who were sober and saw the same thing happening. And it was out of the box of what I had been taught about physics. I'm a very left brain kind of guy. And I need proof and science and logic and stuff to guide me about all kinds of things. But what had just happened should not have happened. And yet it was as real as anything. And I thought to myself, man, two things, if an ordinary guy like me can sit in a group, do some meditation, some visualization, and then this happens, then anybody can do this. I'm nobody special. Plus, if this can happen once and blow the physics that I know out of the water, then it can happen more than once. It's probably happening all the time. And the knowledge that we have of what's going on must be some kind of a subset of a larger transdimensional physics that we are still discovering or yet to discover. So I accepted that experience, and I knew then that I needed to organize people around the world, because that's what I was doing in the 60s and the 70s. I was a young social political activist in my youth. And now I had the internet, as a tool, which most of us could never have dreamed would be possible back in the day. But having had that experience, I just thought people around the world need to get together, share our stories, teach each other, and come out of that closet and let us each other know that we're all not crazy, and that there are so many more of us than anybody realized who've had these experiences, and we need to become a force for good to reveal this. And that's what disclosure is about. And that was the primary experience. There's one more that happened that week. If you'll allow me the time, I'll try to make it short. I had asked my wife to come with me during that week, and she's a very grounded, practical person, and said, go have fun with this new adventure of making this kind of contact. But I have a couple businesses to run. I got bills to pay. I do believe that there's life out there. I believe they're here, but I don't see what it has to do with my daily life. So I support you, and go have fun. And that's what I did. I talked to her every morning during that week while I was away. And I would describe to her the experiences we had the night before, what I was learning, what I was seeing, the new friends I was making. And one morning I think it was about the fourth morning, as I was starting to tell her what had happened last night to me, to us, the group there, she stopped me and said, wait a minute, before you start, I have a story to tell you. And I thought to myself, what could be more exciting than what I saw? Well, I was wrong. It was. In our bedroom, as she was turning out the light and getting comfortable, slipping down into bed, fixing the pillow, she has really good night vision, and I have to say she's an internal clairvoyant, a professional clairvoyant of many years. But what I'm about to describe that she saw was with her physical eyes, with the lights out. At the foot of our bed there suddenly appeared 4, maybe 5 translucent, 3-foot tall high beings, large heads, almond-shaped eyes, a little bit of a mouth, but not really much more definitive in features than that. I mean, that was enough. They were bipedal. There was a neck, there were shoulders, and they were not visible from the waist down, which says to me they were physical enough that the edge of the bed was blocking the lower parts of their bodies. So we kind of assumed, because they had 2 arms, a neck, shoulders, and a head, they also had two legs, bipedal. And they stared at her, and she was shocked. And this is the woman who, though she was a NASA geek when she was a child, she was never into science fiction and fantasy and astronomy. So she just didn't have the imagination for that. But what was in front of her was something she never expected or wanted or hoped to see, unlike some of the rest of us, right? But there they were. And she said she was shocked, speechless, but she felt these waves of love coming off of them. And as she says, when we do interviews and tell this story, she says, who could be afraid of that much love? It was just love. And in a very sing-song fashion, telepathically, they said to her, who are you? To this day, we figure that they found me in Mount Shasta with the group up there doing our thing. And because I was that connected to her, they probably followed some kind of energetic, pathway to see what was at the other end. And at the other end was my wife. We're very close. We share a lot. So that's what they discovered. And that's what they were asking. Well, who are you? And she thought she should ask them something. And the only thing she could think of telepathically was, where are you from? To this day, she says the better question would have been, because she's also has an engineering degree, and that part of her should have asked, according to her, how'd you get here? Give me the physics, give me the formulas, give me the science. But she didn't do that. She said, where are you from? And slowly again in her mind, in a sing-song fashion, the answer came as Arcturus. And then they were gone after that. They just dissolved. She went to sleep. Again, a lot of people would have been a mess after something like that, but she's seen and heard a lot in her career as a psychic advisor, a clairvoyant with guides and interdimensional beings, that this was just a new experience, a dramatic one that she hadn't had. So it's like, okay, she'll tell her husband Costa in the morning when he calls. And that's what we did. So at that point, my jaw has hit the floor at this point, and I'm going, wow. And she asked me, Arcturus, is that a place? And I said, oh, yeah, it's a hyper red giant in the constellation Butes. It's Astronomy 101, right? It is a place. Things have been written about it. People have been visited by other Arcturians, and it's a thing. So she goes, okay, by the way, it's personal now. So because she had that experience, she finally said to me, it's personal. Next year, can I come with you? And that was very profound too. And it was nice because each of us had our own dramatic experience.
A new Richard Syrett's Strange Planet drops every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Subscribe at strangeplanetpodcast.com.